strong.
Chapter 321, Question. Since Qin is from someone known as ceremonial, Ye Fusion will naturally settle it. King Yuan did not look back. He and Ye Wuchen both stood there quietly. The only relative who could make a decision this time was King Liu, but King Liu didn't seem to want to easily approve of his relatives in the Qin dynasty. He wanted to see how Wang Liu planned to do it. Ye Fusion, your speech is a little unreasonable. The so-called lady of the lady is very kind. My uncle naturally met Princess Shenyu. It is really strange at first glance. Although a grown man, he is facing his lover. Is there any way to make sense? Your words are too absurd. King Li replied, moreover, this time my uncle came to propose. The Qin dynasty and Donghazong troops are willing to take a look. As for Ye Yun of the Fuyun sect, he came to propose to Princess Liu Guo. Fuyun Janzong's opinion, or idea. Fuyun Janzong doesn't think so. At this time, Chiao, the first peak of Fuyun Janzong, said. Ye Fusion glanced indifferently at the other side. Is Fuyun Janzong on the side of the Qin dynasty? Chiao's appearance is indifferent. Fuyun Janzong and Dosheng have a grudge. He always had a complaint with the thatched hut. He warned Ye Wuchen several times not to get too close to Ye Fusion, but Ye Wuchen never ignored him. Naturally, they would not stand on the side of a traitor like Ye Wuchen. That being the case, Ye Wuchen came to propose relatives only of his own free will. King Li said lightly, in this case, wouldn't it insult Princess Shenyu? The seventh peak strongman who came with Ye Wuchen along with Ye Wuchen glanced at King Li. Was this disdainful Ye Wuchen not qualified to raise relatives? Insulting Ye Wuchen is naturally insulting the seventh peak. Behind King Li, there are also strong people looking at them, and there is a faint coercion between the two sides. King Liu hasn't spoken yet, just watching the scene quietly. He invited all the characters to come to see how the situation in the eastern wasteland was now. Several things can be seen from the responses of these people. A group of defeated generals also have faces here to show off their strength. The rest of his eyes looked at King Li, his eyes were very displeased. Originally, Ye Wuchen cut off his arm to stop them from hunting. He thought of Ye Wuchen as a brother. King Li completely humiliated Ye Wuchen and unqualified, this bunch of trash. The Qin dynasty's face was a little unsightly. The rest of his life is definitely the battle of the Song dynasty. The lodge did not lose against the Qin and Donghazong dynasties. You don't need to argue. Wang Liu smiled and waved at this time. He looked towards King Yuan and Ye Wuchen and said, these two are the leaders of the younger generation in the eastern wasteland. They both really value drowning fish. Do everything. He smiled and looked at Royal Minister Liu Guo and asked, what do you think? King Liu did not ask Liu Shenyu's opinion, because Liu Shenyu already knew what he was thinking, so there was no need to ask him. Everyone's eyes flickered, and they were very quiet, no one spoke first. At this time, King Yuan was in debt again to himself, and said, my father has told me that if His Majesty King Liu consents to this family matter, it will be too sad for Princess Shenyu to marry far away. I will stay in Liuguo and follow Princess Shenyu serve His Majesty the Willow King. Everyone's expressions flickered. King Yuan expressed his willingness to enter the Willow Kingdom. In fact, it shouldn't have happened in his capacity, but he still did. This is the sincerity of the Qin dynasty and the pressure of the state. My Qin dynasty is willing to do it. Could it be that Liu Guo still didn't accept it? Your Honor. At this time, in the prince's tent, a figure with a majestic figure wearing a Chinese suit folded his arms and said, with the sincerity of the Qin dynasty, I see the Prince of Qin as an extraordinary person. Your Majesty can consider this. This speaker is King Liu, King Kang. Kang Wang's words make sense, and I hold the same opinion. Someone took the lead, and others started talking, and they all agreed to King Yuan and Liu Shenyu's marriage. As for Ye Wuchen, standing there alone, no one asked, no one wanted to speak for him. The reason is without him. One of them was that Ye Wuchen had never visited these people and had no friendship. The other is that Ye Wuchen is only a disciple of the seventh peak of Fuyun Janzong, and can't even represent Fuyun Janzong. On the other hand, if His Majesty really chose Ye Wuchen over King Yuan, if the Qin dynasty would be angry, it would be Liu Guo. Similarly, they will definitely get involved. What humans call as self-defeating. As for Princess Liu Shenyu, who cares what she thinks? This is just a sentence from His Majesty King Liu. This bunch of bastards. Liu Feiyang looked coldly at the minister who spoke, and received the benefits of the Qin dynasty or was afraid of the Qin dynasty. King Liu also looked at them with a majestic eye smile, whereas what he thought was unknown. It seems that everyone looks good to Prince Keen. Wang Wang said with a smile, Prince Keen is amazing and I appreciate it, but this is a lifetime event involving the sinking of fish. I have to think carefully. Therefore, it will take time. Only then can we decide. We'll await your majesty's decision. King Yuan smiled and bowed. Ye Wuchen glanced at the sinking willowfish. Everything was bad for him, and he felt an invisible pressure. I invite you to come to my country Liu, and I will arrange a palace for you in the royal palace. There are many ancient monuments in King Liu, and you can have as much fun as you like. King Liu said with a smile, also, you have heard of it. Liu Guo Guoshan. Everyone's eyes flashed, the legend of Guoshan, people of all powers naturally heard. According to legend, Guoshan existed earlier than Liu Guo. The reason why Liu Guo stayed here was because of Guoshan. The Guigu mountains in the Liu kingdom were all cast by spirit stones. It was said that the entire mountain had countless law formations. Of course, the name Guoshan did not come from this, but because there was a turtle fairy in Guoshan, who was rumored to be an old monster who had lived for many years, the turtle. There was even a rumor circulating in the eastern wasteland that Liu Guo was able to develop the country because of the turtle's existence. Before every generation of King Liu Guo succeeded, he had to set foot on the peak of Mount Guoshan and be blessed by the turtle fairy before he could inherit Datong. This old turtle has incomprehensible divine and ghost abilities, can divination, and predicts the future. Of course, this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but it is certain that this turtle fairy has abilities similar to astrologers and is a totem. From Liu Guo. At this time, King Liu suddenly mentioned Guoshan, and some of them did not understand what it meant. Rumors Guoshan, like Le Guanir, always coveted it. Now, taking this opportunity, I also want to go to Guoshan to see the sacred place of the Liu kingdom. King Yuan said with a smile. Yi Shanren, now on top of Guoshan, I will order people to open Guoshan. In the past few days, anyone who wants to go to Guoshan will let go. If anyone can get Yi Shanren's blessing and give a horse to Liu Guo, of course no problem. Liu Wang said with a smile, then stood up and left. Before he left, he glanced at King Yuan and Ye Wuchen. The ministers of the king's eyes lit up. Did Liu Wang want King Yuan and Ye Wuchen to go to Guoshan to see the tortoise fairy? However, over the years, only the historical kings of the Liu kingdom were qualified to set foot in Guoshan. Even if Guoshan was really exposed, how could King Yuan and Ye Wuchen be able to do it and meet the legendary turtle fairy? Even if they were ministers, they had never seen the turtle fairy. King Yuan showed a faint color, didn't expect that King Liu would have such a stupid idea to let him and Ye Wuchen go to compete in Guoshan. However, the two came to propose to relatives at the same time. King Liu was also very polite to him, and finally pushed to Guoshan, who seemed to be justified, really an old fox. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the father and king did not agree with King Yuan on the spot, but they were still not optimistic. They naturally realized where Guoshan was. If Ye Wuchen and King Yuan can't set foot in Guoshan, see for the tortoise fairy, how will father choose? Liu Shenyu's eyes stared at Ye Wuchen, the two eyes were opposite each other, as if they understood the meaning in each other's eyes. Liu Shenyu turned and left, and Liu Feiyang came down and came to Ye Wuchen and Ye Fusion. He didn't care what the Qin dynasty thought. Take me to Guoshan, Ye Wuchen said to Liu Feiyang. Okay, Liu Feiyang nodded, and then the group turned and left directly, heading outside the palace. King Yuan, who was about to chat with the prince, saw the scene and greeted him casually. Then he turned and left. The other strong parties left one after another. Although they didn't mean to be Liu Guomo, they also wanted to see Liu Guo. Guoshan Holy Land. Outside King Liu's palace, many people were waiting for news. When they saw the strong people from all sides stepped out, they hesitated, and wanted to know if King Liu had agreed to King Yuan's proposal. Soon, proper news came out in the palace. Today, not only King Yuan proposed, but the Cloud Sword sect left no dust. He also proposed to Liu Wang and wanted to marry Liu Shenyu. This made many people understand that it was Ye Wuchen Liu Shenyu who liked him. No wonder they and Ye Fusion were always together. However, even the first peak of Fuyun Janzong is on King Yuan's side. As Ye Wuchen's seventh peak sword, how to compete with King Yuan? News of Guoshan naturally also spread. Guoshan, a sacred place in Liu Guo, is about to open. For the time being, I don't know how many strong people have gone to Guoshan to gather. The Guoshan Holy Land has always been a place where King Liu Guo is only qualified to set foot. Mystery is unpredictable. Liu Guo had too many people curious about Guoshan. In addition, His Majesty said that as long as he can get the blessing of the Turtle Fairy, he can help his country. As a result, I don't know how many strong people have come from the outside of Gushan, which is dozens of miles from the palace. As the sacred place of the Liu kingdom, there is a palace at the foot of Mount Gushan, which surrounds Mount Gushan. This is a place of sacrifice for King Liu's family. There is a heavy army guarding Mount Gushan and surrounds the entire Mount Gushan, surrounded by Mount Gushan. This place has a very high observation tower, no one is allowed to approach from the air. But at this time, the gates of the palace on the outskirts of Gushan opened, many strong people flocked, and came to the feet of the mysterious Gushan. Chapter 322, Climbing the Mountain. Gushan is surrounded by sad clouds, and the whole Gushan is towering, resembling a turtle. Standing at the feet of Gushan, you can feel a very strong aura. The light of various attributes is refracted on Gushan, and it is very beautiful. At this time, many people appeared here, and many family figures from King Liu city came one after another. However, the mountain front is still strong from the Qin dynasty and Ye Fusion. Many young men and women from the Liu Goshi family looked to Qin Yuan, Qian Shan Mu, Ye Fu Tian, and the others. The top arrogant figures that Donghang had hit with the targets that all the young people in Donghanging were pursuing. That's the benchmark. King Mengruo and Chushi are very beautiful. A family member, Liu Guo, marveled at the beauty of the two. She is also a beautiful woman. He used to think that the three beauties in the eastern wasteland might not be much prettier than him, but actually at first glance, the charm of the three beauties in the Fang Zhidong wasteland was far worse than shame. Prince Qin is very handsome. A woman next to him looked at Qin Yuan. Among the crowd, Qin Yuan was definitely one of the best men. Isn't Ye Fusion handsome? The woman in blue next to her laughed. Naturally handsome, but I prefer Prince Kun's gentleness. I heard that Ye Fusion was too proud and aggressive. The disciples in the cottage did not look at anyone, and blunted Prince Qin as a villain, but Prince Qin did not comment on him. Therefore, I admire Prince Qin more. He and Princess Shenyu were born with each other. Do you know Ye Fusion's words in the ancient world? At this time, a young man of about 18 years old asked next to him. The person who knows me is my arrogance. The woman asked. Cottage students, there is no need to pay attention to other people's opinions. The youth said lightly, do whatever you want, do it carefully, Fang is the eldest husband. I don't like Prince Qin. He did not say that he thought Prince Qin was a bit of a hypocrite. Then guess who can reach them? The woman laughed. If Qin Yuan competes with Ye Fusion, it is naturally impossible to win, but Ye Wuchen will not know. The young man had great faith in the disciples, which was his pursuit. Although Qin Yuan is only fighting Ye Wuchen, Ye Fusion and the others will also go to Gushan. I heard that Qin Yuan has extraordinary talent. Qian Shanmu, Qin Li, Qin Mengruo, Chu Yi and the others are not talented. Wait and see. See. Not only these people, but the people gathered around at this time were discussing Qin Yuan and Ye Fusion and others. At this time, Qin Yuan and the others took the first step and walked towards Gushan. Ye Fusion, they also stepped forward and went to Gushan. Gushan has no real path. The ancient mountain that was shaped like a turtle was cut into pieces, and the rocks were strange. When they set foot on Gushan mountain, they seemed to be carrying a turtle, and their steps were very heavy. Ye Fusion tried to fly in the air, but found that the troops directly suppressed him back, and just walked over. However, this is also expected. If you can fly in the air, not everyone can go to Gushan. Liu Feiyang also climbed Mount Gushan with Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion asked, how long will it take Gushan to reach the top? I do not know. Liu Feiyang shook his head. The people who rose to the peak of Gushan are all past kings of the Liu kingdom. I heard that in this Gushan, many royal figures have lost themselves, so be careful. Ye Fusion nodded. He glanced at the Qin dynasty crowd not far away. They also went up step by step. Qin Yuan walked in the middle. Qin Li seemed to feel something, towards Ye Fusion a glimpse. When they walked to Gushan mountain, the entire mountain seemed to be shrouded in fog and could not be seen clearly at the foot of the mountain. Right now, apart from going up, they couldn't tell the direction at all and didn't know where they were going. Around them, there were many powerful Liu Guo forces following them to set foot in Gushan, trying to see where they could go. As time passed, the footsteps of the people became heavier and heavier, and the invisible pressure from Gushan continued to grow stronger and stronger. Behind Liu Guqiang, the steps of many people began to slow down, and even some people couldn't move anymore and sat down to rest. A scream came out, echoing in the mountains, which made many people feel afraid, not as easy as when they set foot in Gushan. Still able to move forward steadily, Only the top figures at the forefront, and a few extremely talented people in Liu Guo, but even their pace is slowly slowing down. Behind, among the mountaineering crowd, a woman practicing magic stopped and said to her friend, "I'm going to rest." After all, he sat on a rock and wanted to gather the heavens and earth around him to practice spiritual aura. The mountain climber was too tired, and his aura was constantly being consumed. Because he didn't practice martial arts, his body couldn't last too long. Okay. The others nodded and sat down to rest, but soon, the bodies of the group began to tremble slightly, and then they seemed to have an invisible force tugging at their bodies, and smashing into the air. At this time, several successive exclamations pierced the silent Guoshan, and the echo continued, and the climbers in the fog became less resolute. Furthermore, such voices continued, and people's hearts became more and more unstable. Ye Fusion, they are still advancing steadily, and the people around them are no longer visible. He didn't know where their King Yuan was. Carrying out the idea of freedom view, he saw a huge turtle being suppressed, much more terrifying than Wulianchang on the heavy mountain. He could only merge with the idea. Otherwise, he would not take too many steps. If it could be used for physical exercise in normal times, but now it's not exercise, but climbing. After spending a day walking, Ye Fusion was equally exhausted. Now, they don't even know where they came from. This sense of the unknown is the most terrifying, as if it will never end. Do you want to rest? Ye Fusion asked. This was the first time he had mentioned rest. Even a strong body has a very tired feeling. Ye Wuchen Lu Langxiu naturally did the same. Ye Wuchen paused, then nodded gently, and each of them sat on the ground with their eyes closed. When Ye Fusion closed his eyes, he felt sleepy and exhausted. He wanted to calm his mind and sleep well. His body became fluttering, as if hanging in the air. Suddenly his mind, there was an abyss in his hand, holding it. Can't rest. Ye Fusion opened his eyes suddenly and shouted, and everyone woke up and opened his eyes. A sharp ray of light flashed, and his breath was slightly short. The group looked at each other, took a deep breath, and then stood up and continued to climb. This is really your holy land in the Liu Kingdom. Ye Fusion looked at Liu Feyang in his heart. I heard my father mention that the Guizhou people who are not persistent cannot set foot. If they want to become the king of the Liu Kingdom, they must pass the Guoshan level. Liu Feyang responded. Ye Fusion was a bit depressed, so he had to bite his head and keep rushing, but they were so, maybe other people were not upset. Ye Wuchen was silent on his way up the mountain. This problem is not resolved. He was annoyed, so his eyes were firmer. Days and time passed, this mountain turtle seemed like it would never be able to reach the top of the mountain. Their Ye Fusion was very tired, their legs were heavy, and their bodies were tight. This kind of spirit and body is very tight for a long time. It's too uncomfortable. At the feet of Guoshan, many people saw the figure in Guoshan. In the past, many climbers, many of them fell, some were lightly injured, some were seriously injured, but there were still some people who came forward and managed to climb up to try to break through themselves. They can see the line of figures on the mountain side of Mount Guoshan. Those who have already climbed half of the mountain are all top-level troops, and even those who previously had top-level troops could not survive the fall, including the prince figures. Prince Qin and Ye Fusion seem to be in the same position. Someone said, the figures appear very small in the field of vision, and the two of them walk halfway. I wonder if there is a chance to reach the top. Ye Fusion himself didn't know where they were. At this moment, their bodies appeared to be in a very tired state. At this moment, the mountain road seems to be much flatter and better to go. In the clouds and fog, a sea of flowers appeared, spectacular and beautiful. Are you going upstairs? Ye Fusion said. He looked at the people beside him, but found that the people around him were nowhere to be seen. The rest of my life, no dust. Ye Fusion shouted, no answer, as if disappeared from thin air. Frowning slightly, in the sea of flowers, Ye Fusion saw a beautiful figure appear. Beautiful eyes stared at him, as if the heart melted. Chu Shi. Ye Fusion showed a strange look, and then he saw Chu Chu's charming expression looking at him, approached step by step, stretched out his hand, and looked at him very stupidly. Illusion. Ye Fusion's body continued to move forward, ignoring the beautiful figure of the figure, passing by, and then he saw another illusion. The noble and arrogant beauty of the Queen Qin Mengruo played the piano, and the melody was melodious, and there was Wang Qingquan in front of her. When Qin Yin stopped, Qin Mengruo stood up, put her hands on her shoulders, and lowered the shirt, revealing her fair shoulders, and her beautiful legs stepped into the clear spring and wet the shirt. At this moment, he suddenly faced her. He looked back and smiled. Ye Fusion blinked. How could he see this illusion? Don't ignore the indecency. Ye Fushun lifted his steps and continued to move forward, ignoring the beautiful scenery. Then, Lin Yao, Sister Qing Yi, Lu Langxiu. The people who should have appeared should not have appeared in the illusion. Suppressing Ye Fushun, is this a mood test? Why are there so many beautiful people? He is not lust. Of course, the image that made his heart almost hard to resist was still the appearance of rhetoric, but he still restrained himself and came to Japan. The rest of his life also experienced illusions, but he experienced much simpler than Ye Fushun. There is no beauty around. Only two people appeared in his illusion, his father and Ye Fushun. Chapter 323, The Battle at Guashan. Ye Fushun was very depressed. He was physically and mentally exhausted during the mountaineering. More and more, he would rather fall straight on Guashan if he could, too tired to stretch his mind. And despair, you can't see the end, you can't see the dawn. In such a state, fragrant photos keep appearing to excite him. Isn't this terrible? In a situation where people are extremely tired in spirit and body, their willpower also naturally decreases. If they want to completely relax and fall, it is increasingly difficult to resist. What is even more terrifying is that the illusory images that Ye Fushun is experiencing are becoming more and more beautiful. That red powder is like a skull. Ye Fushun walked with his eyes closed, but it was still in vain. The images were human-like and instantly reflected in his mind. It is completely unavoidable. If this is really hard training, it will be too hard. No wonder Liu Feiang claims that many children of the Liu King family lost themselves in Guashan. If he chose to drown, would he be lost in the sea of desire? He does not know. In my mind, Waji's face appeared, and a bright smile appeared on the corner of Ye Fushun's mouth. As a beautiful woman, I keep my heart in mind. If the water is 3000, I take a spoon. However, Waji's illusion appeared from time to time. Ye Fushun whispered, Fairy, you are really going to be in trouble. Thinking of dust-free things, Ye Fushun gritted his teeth and continued to walk forward. Above Guashan, more than Ye Fushun has gone through the test of nature. At this time, King Yuan also experienced a lot of photos. He was so exhausted. He saw his father Qin sitting on the throne and stretched out his hand with a smile, as if he could sit on the throne if he wanted to. King Yuan's face was distorted and looked extremely painful. How he wanted to sit in that position, but he knew that it was not his. The throne of the Qin dynasty belongs to King Yu, and he never wants to touch his fingers. In fantasy, he saw King Li appear in front of him without a fight. If he wants, he can kill King Li. His face becomes haggard, and he can't wait to kill King Li. Everyone in the world thought that the king of Qin loved him, but it was just an appearance. Since he loved him, why did he exile to Liu country and become a horse? This is to distance himself from power, not to have delusions, and he also has to achieve his goal, but in fact, he is very reluctant to give a horse to Liu Guo. Married to Liu Shenyu. Although Liu Shenyu is beautiful, isn't her half-sister Qin Mengruo beautiful? As the three beauties of the eastern wasteland, her appearance is naturally above Liu Shenyu, as well as Chu Yan, the Moon sect who touched Chuchu. Why didn't she leave Qin to marry? In what ways is he worse than King Li? In the illusion, he appears to be in the Qin palace. In that extremely luxurious palace, a fantastic sight appeared in front of him. The noble and arrogant Qin Mengruo, the beautiful Chu Chu moved, Liu Liu's daughter of the drowning fish and the wild goose all lay down. In front of her, there was only a thin blanket on her body, and her beautiful white arms and legs were exposed. As long as he wanted, he could enjoy the happiest things in the world right now. Such an image, he could perish forever. Her face is constantly changing and changing, very embarrassed, she is gritting her teeth, biting blood, her eyes are red, and outsiders will never dare to imagine King Yuan's beautiful man, who is gentle and elegant, and the jade tree is blown by the wind. There will be such a face, as if he showed it on weekdays. What came out and what he showed at the moment were two extremes. Shaking his body, King Yuan ignored the image he dreamed of and continued to move forward. He knew what he had to do now. If he failed this time, he would not be able to return. Chu Yan did not know that he appeared in the illusion of many men. At this time, he was also having a test. He was tired and wanted to stop and rest. There is someone you can count on. He was too tired, as if he felt like he was going to fall. He found that he couldn't get out. At this time, a figure appeared not far in front of him. The figure was very handsome, his eyes were very handsome, he had a faint smile on his face, which seemed to have a bad feeling. The handsome figure approached him and smiled, I will carry you. Speaking, he crouched down with his back to his face, and a bright smile appeared on his touching face. At this moment, he didn't want to think about whether it was right or wrong, and he didn't want to think about the consequences. He just wanted to lie down, rest well on his back. So he tilted his toes and lay on the young man's back, his arms around his neck, his head resting on his shoulder, and a sweet smile on his face. Such a picture is very beautiful, do not pretend to be the most authentic self. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. I don't know how long it took. Ye Fushun, who was almost exhausted to the limit, appeared in front of the road above Guashan, and finally no illusion appeared in his mind. At this moment, Bayun is flowing in the air, calm and serene. Above him, he could see the ancient palace atop Guashan mountain, as if he was almost there. Ah, you're finally out. Ye Fushun took a deep breath. He walked in front of a boulder and sat cross-legged, recovering his mental and physical strength. After a while, the rest of the life in Ye Wuchen also stepped out, came to Ye Fushun and sat down, and then, Liu Feiyang and Lu Langxiu also appeared. Yin Zuwei Yin Da has never appeared, it is likely to be trapped in the illusion. This matter has nothing to do with him, without too strong an obsession, it is normal not to be able to come here. Without much rest, Ye Wuchen stood up and watched his movements. Ye Fushun and others got up and continued to climb. The pressure is still great, but without the illusion, they will not go astray. In the distance, they saw several figures appear, but they were actually Qin Yuan, Qin Li, Qian Shenmu, and Qin Mengruo. In the other direction, the figures of Dao Zigu Qiuqi and magician Jiu Biu also appeared, they even came here. Of course, the will of the two is also very difficult. Several people came down, and there were also strong people from the Ji family, only one person was the outstanding character of the Ji family, Ji Kong. The first peak of Fuyun Janzong, Zongsong, and Chiao also appeared, and there was also a person in Zuawangdian. The party went up one by one, at this step, should not be too far from the top of the mountain. The people of the Qin dynasty and Ye Fushun walked side by side. Qin Yuan returned to normal at this point. His handsome face was gentle and elegant, his eyes always looking up. Qin Li glanced at Ye Fushun, who was next to him, and smiled. Ye Fushun, in the past you beat me in the East Qin Tianzhao Academy. I have always wanted to learn from you, but I am not comfortable with you take a shot, but in the Nandu kingdom, you kill Luo Jinlin. His combat strength is extraordinary. Now, you want to learn how your combat strength is. The words fell, and his figure walked to Ye Fushun's side, not only him, Qian Shenmu and Qin Mengruo flashed to the side, and his body was exaggerated. Qin Yuan continued to climb as if he had not seen it. I want to stop us. Liu Feiyang looked cold, and Ye Fushun naturally understood Qin Li's intentions. At this moment, Qin Li was released with a domineering heavenly atmosphere, and the dragon phantom surrounded him. Long Shao's voice sounded in the void. Qin Li stepped forward and stepped towards Ye Fushun with terror. As an extraordinary demon figure, Qin Li's talent is very strong. He opened 8 dragon veins, which is an 8-pulse rare item in Qin dynasty. Person is for Jumai, that was the limit. You can leave without dust. Ye Fushun said. Today's protagonists are Ye Wuchen and Qin Yuan. It didn't matter that they couldn't climb to the peak of Guashan, but Ye Wuchen had to go up. The souls of Qian Shan Mu and Qin Mengruo appeared, Qin Se and Ming Ming, all fell on Qin Li, making him even more ruthless, like a true dragon emperor. Qin Lixian raised his hand and reached out, and suddenly a terrifying true dragon whistled towards Ye Fushun and others. They opened their teeth and claws. Ye Fushun saw the real dragon commit suicide. The Qin dynasty royal family has 8 dragon veins, and the dragon is like a real dragon. Ye Wuchen's body suddenly bloomed with a boundless sword, and his palm was slapped to the side, and the endless sword energy swept through the world, killing the true dragon towards him, and he continued to walk, like a straight-line sword. Qin Li stared indifferently, stepped out, grabbed Ye Wuchen from the palm of his hand, but saw that at this moment a figure appeared in front of him, and it was Ye Fushun. The 5-element scepter grew in size, turning it into a huge mace. He waved the 5-element scepter in his palm, and then suddenly slashed out with the power of heaven and earth. An extremely terrifying gravity spell fell on the 5-element scepter. The 5-elemental wand weighed tens of thousands of pounds. When it was swept away, the original dragon figure shattered, and it continued to separate into Qin Li. On Qin Li's body, an 8-headed real dragon rod, and a strong and powerful claw gripped directly on the 5-elemental stick, stiffly blocking the 5-elemental stick and continuing to split. At the feet of Guashan, countless eyes looked at the scene above. The eyes of several people released a strange light, as if to penetrate the space, looking at the array of very small figures in Guashan. The battle broke out. Who's fighting? One was so weak that he could not see the image of Guoshan in the fog. Kotang Ye Fusion and Qin Wang Sun Qin Li, Qian Shenmu, Qin Mengruo and the rest of their lives may also participate in the war. What about Prince Qin Yuan? Still climbing, side by side with Ye Wuchen. At the foot of the mountain, there was a constant sound. Many people were in an uproar. Did Qin Li and Ye Fusion start a fight? There is no way to see this fight, only a blurry shadow in Guoshan. Who can win Qin Wangsun and Ye Fusion? Someone asked, because he couldn't see clearly, so he was restless. Qin Wang Sun Qin Li's talent is really terrible, and the realm is very high, but Kusaba's combat power has been proven. He had killed Luo Junlin in the suspended king temple. I don't know. Qin Wangsun's 8 dragons are all exposed. Ye Fusion is holding a magic weapon. Someone took a deep breath and was so depressed that they couldn't see it. It was a pity that they couldn't see the battle scene on Guoshan Mountain. Chapter 324, Crazy Person. In Guoshan, Ye Fusion and Qin Li were standing opposite each other. The strong oppressive might was still there, but at this moment they were fighting under this heavy pressure. The people of the Qin dynasty royal family opened their veins and majored in martial arts abilities. Ye Fusion's beast refining, Wushwang's flesh casting, is also very tyrannical. A real dragon surrounds Qin Li, his soul is a dragon, and his lore is a dragon. The meridians in his body turned into dragon veins, and the bones in his body were like dragon bones, and the veins roared like dragon bodies. An indifferent smile was sketched on the corner of his mouth, looking at Ye Fusion. Behind him, Qin Sa's voice continued to fall on him, increasing his strength, making Qin Li's breath rising even more terrifying. At the same time, a sharp sound passed through Ye Fusion's eardrums, tickling his tired mental strength. Yes. The rest of his life walked towards Qian Shenmu, and Lu Langxiu went in the direction of Qin Mengruo. Liu Feiyang did not participate in the battle. Although he went up with Ye Fusion and others, his identity was King Liu's son. The Qin dynasty came to visit him. He and the people of the Qin dynasty broke apart. It was easy for the Qin dynasty to seize it as an excuse to attack the Liu kingdom. Where to go? Qin Li sneered, and he attacked with both hands. 8 dragon shadows soared into the sky and headed straight for the 3. The true golden dragon's claws were extremely sharp and destroyed everything. For the rest of his life, a huge monster tripod appeared, a loud noise, a monster tripod flew out, the black monster tripod killed everything, and blasted the real dragon body. Lu Langxiu experienced a chilling chill that welled up. The frozen ice spell bloomed, the real dragon condensed into ice, but continued to move forward, trying to tear everything apart, but saw the cold ice right in Lu Langxiu's hand. The staff waved, the endless ice aura enveloped the real dragon, and then there was a click, the ice broke, and the real dragon's body shattered. Ye Fusion raised the 5 elemental stick with both hands, and various brilliance shone on the 5 elemental stick, turning it into an enormous stick, splitting from the sky, splitting everything apart. But what was more uncomfortable was the piercing sound of Qian Shenmu. The 3 of them had an illusion, making them feel that Qin Li's every move seemed to be immovable, and every punch seemed to send them flying far away. Although Qian Shenmu is only in the heaven realm, as the first person of the younger generation in the eastern wasteland, his mental strength is definitely much stronger than Ye Fusion's 3 people. Spiritual spells released through rhythm naturally had extreme threat. Holy music. Ye Fusion felt that Qin Li's figure in front of him looked very tall, like a saint. It appeared in Choge City when he and Qian Shenmu were discussing the melody, but it was Qian Shenmu at that time, and now he turned into Qin Li. Sacred music can also help in battle, used on Qin Li. Qin Li opened his mouth and made noises. The sounds were blurry, like dragons. The breath on his body became even more terrifying, and Ye Fusion's third mind shook violently, as if a mysterious power had come. The far face bloomed, the ape shadow roared, Ye Fusion's body became extremely terrifying, the blood on his body rolled, the prince was about to roll, the 5 elemental stick danced, the sky changed color, and the sky trembled. Now, I want to divide the sky. Qin Li looks domineering and indifferent. Under the addition of sacred music, his realm is much higher than Ye Fusion. What could he be afraid of? He stretched out his hand and turned it into a real dragon arm. A terrifying dragon shadow surrounded the arm. On, again grabbing straight for the 5-element wand. Along with a loud roar, many true dragon figures were split and broken, but Qin Li's arm firmly gripped the 5-element staff, and one dragon shadow head caught the 5-element staff. These are the treasures of the Yin family, when they belonged to their original owners. Qin Li said indifferently, at this moment he bloomed his glory. He is the grandson of the Qin dynasty and the son of the prince. In the future, the Qin dynasty will inherit the ancestors, open the 8 dragon veins, be baptized with the dragon blood, and conceived by the ancestors. Ye Fuxian held a 5-elemental scepter in his hand, and the cape had its body, staring coldly at Qin Li. Want to take it? On the 5-elemental stick, the aura of ice and fire bloomed, and the aura in Guashan gathered like a madman. The ice spell covered Qin Li's body little by little, and the flame turned into a furnace. In the hands of Ye Fuxian, the prince will pass the 5-element stick. For Qin Li's body. Do you think it's useful? Qin Li looked indifferently at Ye Fuxian. He was at the 3rd level of the heavens, his physical body was incomparable, and a golden light covered his body. He turned into the body of a golden dragon, with a golden dragon hidden in his body. The ice and fire spells struck and remained motionless. Boom! The terrifying furnace flames wrapped Qin Li's body and turned into the sun. Within the flames, it seemed as if a dazzling ray of extreme golden fire was released from Ye Fuxian's body. The scepter of the 5 elements vanished, and the flame appeared brighter and brighter, like the flame of the sun, and became part of the sun's flame. Oh, the golden dragon's body seemed to melt and burn. Qin Li frowned slightly, feeling a little pain. Then he lowered his head, and saw oddities appear in more places above his body. The golden flame, like the flame of the emperor, can destroy any defensive power. Boom! Qin Limeng loosened his arm holding the waxing stick, and his body quickly retreated, but at this moment, the rest of his life and Lu Langxiu had rushed to Qian Shenmu and Qin Mengruo. If they didn't finish it, they would be in a lot of trouble. The magic tripod spread widely and turned into a suspended dark magic tripod. It pressed down on Qian Shenmu's head, and the power of the magic path fell, as if it had turned into a dark world, and a faint demon head came. With his hands frantically moving the gather strings, the sacred music no longer enveloped Qin Li, but fell on himself, as if he was a saint. The body of his remaining life appeared under the magic tripod, and his burly body showed a terrifying golden glow. He stretched out his hand, and the light uploaded by the magic tripod turned into a marked dark gold-colored square sky painting. He was like a peerless demon head, killing Qian Shenmu in front. When Lu Langxiu arrived in front of Qin Mengruo, her silver eyes became a little strange, snowflakes swirled in the sky, rolled towards Qin Mengruo's body, and cold to the bone marrow, this coldness seemed to be able to freeze the human soul. Many people around saw this battlefield, and they were more interested in this battle than Qin Yuan and Ye Wuchen going up Guashan Mountain. Ellipsis. The battle on this side continued to erupt, while on the other side, Qin Yuan and Ye Wuchen were almost side by side, all rising. They arrived at the bottom of the stone steps, looked up, and they could see the palace at the top of the mountain, as if only through this stone staircase, they could enter the peak of Guashan to see the turtle fairy. They were already very tired, but at this moment they seemed to be getting stronger. The domineering breath permeates the body. Ye Wuchen was like a sword, walking towards the stone steps. He looked calm, his eyes had a foresight. Firmness. The stone steps were filled with tremendous power, as if they were an invisible law formation, with endless lines, like sound waves, flowing down the stone steps. When Ye Wuchen stepped on the stone steps, the invisible ripple seemed to be the sharpest sword in the world, pierced his body, like cutting his body, and the sword on his body flowed. Then stabbed his own body. Attack him with his own strength, the stronger the sword, the stronger the attack. What is even more frightening is that the coercion contained in the stone steps becomes stronger, he must use more strength to step forward to resist the suppression, otherwise he will be directly suppressed. Qin Yuan also experienced the same pain as Ye Wuchen. He resisted coercion with force, but that power became a weapon against his own body. This is a painful thing. He not only had to endure the damage from the forced coercion, but also endured the attacks of his own power. His handsome face gave birth to waves of pain, revealing rays of pain. Whoever thought of such an extinction test? In addition, the stone steps are very long and high, and the resistance he needs will become stronger and stronger until he reaches the limit, and this increased strength will continue to attack himself. Ye Wuchen didn't think too much, he continued his steps upwards, his body was surrounded by sword light, he was a whole body, and his whole body was bright, like a sword body. He was slow but steady, walking step by step, endless swords flowing in his body, stinging his body, and injuring the bone marrow. But then, how can a person repair a sword if he can't even protect what he loves in his life? Swordsman, without fear, without fear. He continued to move upwards, and with each step, the pain became stronger. As he stepped, endless sword intent pierced through the body, and with a little carelessness, it was no longer possible. His sword became stronger, his attacks became stronger, he almost reached his limit, and pierced his flesh. Bloodstains appeared on his shirt, and the body of his sword seemed to have been crushed and crushed. But he did not flinch, there was no pause in his footsteps, and even the sword chi flowing in his body was still getting stronger, and the entire human being was placed in the curtain of destruction that destroyed everything. Crazy. King Yuan followed him, endured the terrible pain, his face was twisted, and saw Ye Wuchen still moving up, step by step so firm, he scolded his heart, for a woman, don't die is it, but thinking about his own task, King Yuan did not give up and continued to ascend. After a while, King Yuan walked halfway and saw that there was still half of the stone steps. King Yuan felt sick. Ye Wuchen had already passed most of the stone steps. Blood kept dripping down the stone steps. King Yuan even suspected it. Can you walk alive? Between the heavens and the earth around him, endless swords pierced Ye Wuchen's body, rampaging through his body. He looked up, his eyes as strong as ever, but his legs stopped, too painful. In their minds, a figure appeared, they did not have a violent feeling, they were tasteless like water, casually looking at each other, delicate and shy, but like dripping and heartwarming. Above Janfeng, a letter, 4 words, can you come? He's here. Since he was here, he would do it naturally. This is a promise and a guardian. If you can't, Wang Jian pierces your heart, although you will never regret it. Chapter 325, Fairy Turtle. At Guoshen's feet, countless eyes stared into the void. There are figures of princes, strong men in the sky, and people in law. On top of Guoshen Mountain, there seems to be a very fierce battle, but a clearer picture as the stone steps below the palace, where there is no fog, and the two figures are clearly visible. Even though they appear very small in the field of vision, they can still see very clearly. King Wang's son, King Yuan, and the 7th peak Jianyun Ye of Fuyun Janzong, Ye Wuchen, reached the last stone steps. They want to reach the top. They seem to be facing terrible resistance. The first half of the stone steps did not continue to move forward, standing in place. And Ye Wuchen, Xiao Shao's back is as arrogant as a pine, straight as a sword. He went up step by step. Although it was slow, it fell into everyone's eyes. With each step, he threw King Yuan further. Everyone thought that there would be no tension in this contest, and the King Khan's young son would definitely win, but at this moment, when Ye Wuchen's figure stepped on all the stone steps, the sunlight in the sky fell on his body. At this moment, he seemed to be bathed in endless light, becoming the most dazzling existence. If the king of the Liu family ascends to the peak of Guoshen, can inherit the throne. Today, Ye Wuchen had reached the peak. Shocked and unexpected, no one thought that Ye Wuchen could do it. After today, the name of Ye Wuchen, the 7th son of Fuyun Janzong, will be comparable to the evil people of the eastern wasteland. King Yuan was still standing where he wanted to try to move forward, but ultimately failed, and was shocked back under the stone steps. The battle between Ye Fuxian and King Li also stopped, looking up at the sky above the stone steps. Ye Wuchen's image disappeared from the field of vision. Ye Fuxian showed a smile and won. The top of Guoshen. Ye Wuchen stepped forward. At this moment, the oppressive might had disappeared. He walked through the door and came to the ancient palace. This is a stone hall. The ground was carved with very intricate patterns. Ye Wuchen saw the patterns. It gave birth to a very mysterious feeling, but couldn't understand it. Junior Ye Wuchen, meet the fairy turtle. Ye Wuchen said. He only had one arm and couldn't bend his arm, so he had to meet him. At this time there was a lot of blood on his white clothes, which was shocking. At the stone gate of the stone hall, a figure slowly crawled out, a turtle. The tortoise's neck stretched very long, his eyes stared at Ye Wuchen, very human, and looked very old. Liu Feiyang said that the tortoise was the totem of Liu Guo, who had lived countless years and was a truly old monster. The turtle's crawling movement was very slow, so slow that it made people lose their temper. Fortunately, Ye Wuchen was a very patient man, he stood calmly. The turtle fairy came up to him and stretched out one leg, like a human arm, holding a willow branch and painting on the ground. The pattern around Ye Wuchen lit up, releasing a brilliant, mysterious light. These patterns seem to consist of countless numbers, which are constantly changing, such as the reduction of the road. Finally, a pattern was established there, and the eyes of the tortoise fairy fell on Ye Wuchen's body. Soft but sympathetic eyes. You must leave Liu Guo. The turtle fairy said, voicing. This was the first sentence he said. Ye Wuchen staggered, looked at the tortoise fairy stupidly, saying, the younger generation doesn't understand. Liu Guo's matter will cause you trouble and you will be involved. The voice of the turtle fairy is very light. Ye Wachan felt a cold feeling in his heart. He is not afraid of danger. With great perseverance, he came to the peak of Gwashan, but he was afraid that he could not change. The turtle fairy said that Liu Go's affairs would give her trouble. Did this mean she couldn't change the outcome? Elderly can predict the future. Ye Wachan asked. The turtle fairy shook her head, even if she moved her head very slowly. No one can predict the future. I can only see things that others cannot see and draw some conclusions. The turtle fairy slowly said, everything in the world has rules to follow, and I can see more because they live longer than others and have limited talent for spiritual practice, so they can only do these boring things. Since Senior cannot see the future, everything is unknown, Ye Wachan said. The turtle fairy looked at him with a gentle smile and strong conviction, but he couldn't change anything. After all, it was just a young man in the heaven realm. Wait a minute, I'll let your friend come over. The turtle fairy said, and then he walked back to the stone cave. His movements were still very slow. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. At this time, under the stone steps on Gwashan Mountain, where King Yuan was, King Li, Qianshan Mu and Ye Fusion, etc. come here, as well as the top figures of all the major powers. They all saw Ye Wachan walking up the stone steps, while King Yuan fell down the stone steps. King Yuan lost to Ye Wachan. King Li's face was slightly gloomy, and he looked at King Yuan and said, try again. His tone didn't seem to have much respect for his uncle. King Yuan's mother was Nan Fei, a charming fox woman, and the children of such lowly children did not receive her respect. His father was the orthodox heir, the prince of the Qin dynasty, and he was a grandson. King Yuan's pretty face gave off a mist, and he looked at Shiji, knowing that it wouldn't help to try again. Others tried, but soon gave up. They didn't want to be a pony, so they didn't have to hold back. At this moment, it seems that there is an aura of fog throughout the Turtle Mountain. What happened? His eyes are different. Ye Fusion looked at the road in the fog, and then a voice appeared in his mind. Go up the mountain. The voice was soft, as if with a beautiful magic. Ye Fusion showed a strange look, but still climbed the foggy road. After walking for a while, the fog gradually dissipated and the surroundings became clear. He found that he had appeared in front of the stone hall, and Ye Wachan was standing there. This, to the peak of Gwashan. No dust. Ye Fusion stepped forward and came to Ye Wachan, and then saw the old turtle coming out of the rock cave, looking at him gently, making Ye Fusion feel strange. This turtle is fine. Action, appearance and people are too similar. Did Senior bring me here? Ye Fusion asked. The turtle fairy nodded. She slowly walked to Ye Fusion, and then made the same movement as before. The willow branches crossed, the light shone, countless pattern changes, and finally, unlike Ye Wachan, there are many patterns appear. The turtle fairy looked at Ye Fusion and smiled. There are too many variables, and it can't be concluded. What did his predecessor do? Ye Fusion showed a suspicious look. Liu Feiyang said that the tortoise has an incomprehensible ability, knows the past and the present, and knows the future. He certainly didn't believe it. Even an astrologer could only measure the limits of one's life, but there would still be countless changes along the way. You were born extraordinary. The turtle fairy looked at Ye Fusion Road. Ye Fusion froze. It seems that this old turtle known as the turtle fairy still has some abilities. He also knew that he had an extraordinary life experience. Ye Kingdi, Snow Ape, and his father's righteous appearance proved this point. Do you see much beauty in illusion? The turtle fairy looked at Ye Fusion with a smile. Ye Fusion has a black line on his face, this old turtle, you know. Isn't that an illusion? Red powder like a skull, it's just an illusion. It's not my heart, Ye Fusion said truthfully. Jian Yusheng. The turtle fairy looked at him with a smile. Ye Fusion glared at the old turtle. Nonsense, but he was not confused by the illusion. It's human nature too, said the fairy with a smile. Beautiful things naturally have some illusions, which is a normal desire. Everyone has a desire to live in the world, otherwise they cannot be called humans. When a person has no desire, he can become a saint or a demon. Today, many people have ascended to Gwashan, and the turtle fairy saw many things. He saw normal desires and twisted evil desires. Some people are romantic and have beautiful skin, but the desire hidden in their heart is completely the opposite of skin. Ye Fusion felt pressured and captured. He knew that he would not go to Gwashan. This old tortoise is a bastard, and he can spy on other people's illusions. Could this be why King Liu asked them to go to Gwashan? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but reveal a strange color. So, the turtle fairy also saw the illusion in the hearts of the Qin dynasty people. Senior is talking about my friends. Ye Fusion changed the subject. You are a blessed person, the turtle smiled, and Ye Fusion did not understand the meaning of the two words, blessed. Regarding your friend, I advise him to leave, otherwise trouble will befall him. Guxian Ren said, but he seems to be very persistent. Trouble. Didn't Ye Fusion's eyes harden and go to Guashan? What do seniors know? Ye Fusion asked. Come on, you come with me. The turtle fairy walked slowly towards the stone hall. Ye Wachan and Ye Fusion looked at each other, then followed him into the stone hall. Stepping into the stone hall, there are hidden treasures in it, as if they did not enter the stone hall, but the world. Here, there is the sun, moon and stars shining, rain and snow falling, yellow sand, and lightning cold wind, each scene interwoven into a map of all things in the world. This is the hard work of my life. It contains the simple rules of all things in the world. I have a limited territory and cannot revoke the true rule of all things. Said. Ye Fusion feels this world, the sunlight shines, the wind blows, the violent thunder and lightning, the power of each attribute, all operate in their own laws, extraordinary. Senior, I have some friends in Guashan, can they also come? Ye Fusion looked at Guxian Rendav. You tucked your head in. The turtle fairy looked at Ye Fusion, then nodded with a smile, it won't take long, so you can do it. Chapter 326, Conspiracy. At the foot of Guashan Mountain at this time, the trapped Guashan Mountain people and the current mountain people descended unharmed. King Yuan, King Li, and Chu Yan gathered together, and countless eyes were on them. King Yuan was defeated when he climbed Guashan Mountain. Ye Wachan set foot in Guashan. According to Wang Liu's will, Ye Wachan will become Liu Guo's horse. So, didn't the Qin dynasty come back powerless? Is Prince Qin ready to surrender? Someone in the crowd asked, will the Qin dynasty surrender? King Li looked at the crowd, and then laughed. The king's son, Liu Feiyang, is Ye Wachan's friend. He went up with Ye Wachan, and Ye Wachan was naturally able to climb to the top of Guashan Mountain. This is King Liu's family. Holy Land, no surprise. Everyone's eyes bulged. King Li was unwilling to admit King Yuan's failure. King Yuan's handsome face looked at the people, smiled, and said, I admire Princess Shenyu with all my heart, how can I give up so easily? Everyone gave a strange look. Is this important to the Qin dynasty? King Li raised his steps, and a group of people left this place. Chu Yan followed, her beautiful eyes glanced at Guashan, they have not come down the mountain, I don't know where, thinking about the illusion that Guashan experienced before, his heart is very complicated. King Li and others returned to the palace, and all the troops also wanted to follow them back to King Liu's palace and wanted to see the next development. King Liu is not in the palace at this time. At the peak of Guashan Mountain, behind the stone hall, there is an inclined plane. On top of the inclined plane, there was a large rock. At this time, the turtle fairy was lying on it. On the hillside, the figure of King Liu will also appear here. Guashan is a sacred place in the Liu kingdom. Only kings of all ages can set foot here freely. What about the senior tortoise reduction? Liu Wang asked, although he is the king of Liu, but the turtle fairy lives for many years, saying that the senior is naturally worthy. When he was young, the turtle fairy had already become a turtle fairy. Have you ever thought about taking people away from the Liu kingdom? The turtle fairy looked at King Liu. King Liu's gaze is so bad, is it really that bad? This is an ancestral inheritance. Even if I want to leave, how can I explain to people? Wang sighed. Tell them to run away to avoid an unknown threat. What about surrender? The turtle fairy said again. King Liu shook his head, feeling a coolness in his heart. Fairy Turtle didn't say anything and was very quiet. King Liu understood what she meant. This is the Liu plague. The Qin dynasty claimed to take Qin Yuan's qualities and make Liu a horse, but how could he believe it? The question is, what if you don't believe it? What about Ye Wachan? Liu Wang suddenly asked. I'm very persistent and will definitely get involved. Guxian Rendav said, although he is not as talented as some people in Guashan, his sword heart is almost pure, and his future achievements will surpass you. No wonder a seventh peak man would name him so early. Wang Liu said, how many people are in that hut? Unlimited, the East Wasteland will change in this generation. The turtle fairy shook her head and said, unfortunately, the Qin dynasty came too soon. I'll go and see them. Liu Wang said, he didn't ask anymore. The turtle fairy can reduce things, but she is not a prophet. His attitude indicated that Liu Guo would be in crisis. The conclusion of this deduction is that this crisis will exist whether he agrees to disagree with the Qin dynasty's marriage. In other words, the purpose of the Qin dynasty may not be to propose. Okay. The tortoise fairy nodded slowly, then descended, the movement was slow, and King Liu waited patiently. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. In the stone hall, Ye Fuxian, Ye Wuchen, the rest of his life, Lu Langxiu, and Liu Feiyang were all there, and the turtle fairy finished it. At this time, a group of people secretly realized the mystery on the stone steps in the stone hall. In the image of this world, the willow branches gently pass by, dancing with the wind, completely cutting the mountain peaks and splitting the rivers. A ray of fire bloomed, but it would last forever, until the sky was consumed. Ye Wuchen felt these photos, his sword flowed in his body, and the willow branches could cut the mountain peaks. How about the sword? He is a sword body, he has a strong sword sense, immersed in it, as if he has turned into a sword, the meaning of the sword, he has heard from the master, a truly strong character, the sword ray can span thousands of miles against the enemy, the so-called thousands of miles to kill without staying. Ye Fuxian also understands that there is a regular operation of various attributes here. When he is free to observe ideas, he looks at them more thoroughly. He recalled the first battle between the three brothers in the Song dynasty in Dongha Zhonglu Nanshan. That power also gave him a similar feeling. Could regular operation be a wise ability? Tortoise Fairy, peeking at the mysteries of the wise realm. This is the realm of legend. At this time, two figures came out of the stone hall, Ye Fuxian, they saw that everyone stopped to feel. His Majesty King Liu. With sparkling eyes, Ye Fuxian was slightly surprised that King Liu actually appeared here with the turtle fairy. At this point, King Liu smiled and did not show any majesty, but looked very good, and smiled at them. How do you feel? Many benefits. Ye Wuchen looked at Wang Yidao. That's good. You can practice here for a while, and don't worry about things there. Wang Liu went to Ye Wuchen and gently patted him on the shoulder. Ye Wuchen stood there a little wrong. What does Liu's attitude mean? Was this to meet him and the drowning fish? But why did the turtle say that they had to go alone, otherwise there would be trouble? King Liu walked past Ye Wuchen and came to Ye Fuxian, his eyes fixed on Ye Fuxian. Your Majesty, Ye Fuxian shouted. Thank you. Wang Liu laughed. Ye Fuxian, I want to ask you something. Ye Fuxian looked confused and looked at King Liu. Your Majesty, please say. Fly and sink the fish, you will take care of it in the future. King Liu said. Ye Fuxian looked at King Liu. Liu Guo was the supreme power in the eastern wasteland. King Liu is the leader of a country. Why is he saying this to himself? This cause. Except, Wang Liu had a bad feeling. I have to do my best. Ye Fuxian Zheng focused his head. Thank you very much, Wang Liu said with a smile, and also patted Ye Fuxian's shoulder. Work hard, the future of the eastern wasteland is yours. After all, he glanced at his son Liu Feiyang again, then turned and walked outside the stone hall, and the turtle fairy sent him away. Ye Wuchen frowned and stood there the entire time. After the turtle fairy sent Liu King out of the stone hall, he came back and said, calm down and train. Since Wang Liu promised you, there will be nothing in the palace. He was clearly referring to the sinking willow fish. Ye Wuchen nodded and continued to practice. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. In King Liu's palace, the princess palace where Liu Shenyu was, then King Yuan's Prince Qin Yuan, came to visit. Is there something about Prince Qin? Liu Shenyu asked softly, his tone was even, but it gave off a sense of distance. This trip to Guashan, experiencing the illusion of Guashan, in the illusion test, the figure of the princess appeared, so when I returned to the palace, I want to see the princess. There were crooked crickets in Guashan before. What's more, Prince Khan's smile seemed to have an extraordinary charm that would make one feel comfortable with it. Although Liu Shenyu hated him a little, he still couldn't help but like seeing that face, not because his face was handsome, but because it was an extraordinary feeling. Liu Shenyu did not respond to his words. What made him say that? It's okay, I just wanted to take a look and say goodbye. Qin Yuan was polite, then turned around and looked very good. Princess, Prince Qin is so beautiful, it's like a natural charm that makes people want to be close to him. Next to Liu Shenyu, the servant said, because Liu Shenyu's personality is good, so the servant will speak like this, otherwise dare to speak. Liu Shenyu's beautiful eyes showed a strange color. He knew the maid's words were true, but right now he was thinking of someone else. A gentle smile flashed across her beautiful eyes, and she really stepped on the peak of Guashan. After King Yuan left, when King Liu returned, King Li and others called King Liu again, but King Liu did not give them an answer, but only invited all parties to come and said that they would not announce until Ye Wuchen returned from Guashan. www.mtlnovel.com. The people in King Liu city are also waiting for the news. Ye Wuchen went to Guashan. I don't know if King Liu will choose him. Over the next few days, King Yuan would visit the princess palace where Liu Shenyu was found every day. King Liu knew about it, but King Yuan did, and he had no reason to stop him. After a few days away, he came back and announced the end. At that time, what reason could the Qin dynasty seek? On this day, only King Li and King Yuan are here. Didn't you win the willow? King Li frowned at this time, his eyes were sharp, and he looked at King Yuan. Liu Shenyu's level is not much lower than mine, it will take time. King Yuan said. In which time, you will see the attitude of the old fox Wang Liu. When Ye Wuchen returns, he will announce the results. In this case, his plan will fail. King Li said coldly, this thing failed you. I will give you 2 more days to finish it and knock down the sinking willow fish completely. Wouldn't you be such a beautiful uncle? There was a twinkling mist in King Yuan's eyes, and he was more interested in the maidservant of the moon sage touching Chu Zun, who had the opportunity to let Chu Shan surrender under him. Is it too risky? King Yuan said. Even if this matter is exposed, in your capacity, will Liu Guo dare to kill you? If Liu Guo shoots you, he will make a contribution. King Liden said indifferently, you are responsible for this matter affecting your father's plans. I understand. King Yuan nodded, then turned around. Looking at his back, there is a coldness in King Li's eyes, and he naturally knows that King Yuan can't wait to kill him and then quickly. The slowly character has extraordinary hopes for the throne, and is just wishful thinking, but it is a hope that good. Skin was indeed a wild species born from that fox spirit. Chapter 327, Killing the Earth. In the evening, King Yuan came to Liu Shenyu Palace again. Many people in the palace are used to it, and everyone knows what Liu Shenyu is doing. The person the princess liked was obviously Ye Wuchen, and the Prince of Qin was just doing useless things. However, Prince Qin is a guest, and he meets every day with ceremonies, and it is impossible for Liu Guo to hunt people. Stepping into Liu Shenyu's palace, there was a mist in King Yuan's eyes, and his mood was very bad. He was so dissatisfied that he had to become Liu Guomo. Now, he was even asked to do dangerous things. King Li was right. He really wanted to leave King Li dead with no place for burial. But what can he do? Even though his mother, Nan Fei, was liked, he knew what kind of ability he was relying on. King supports Nan Fei only for some reasons, but for King Wang, the real goal is the great cause of the world. Prince King UK is the heir, King Li is King Yu's heir. On the surface, he has boundless views, but he is extremely humble in front of King Yu and King Li. Today, he didn't want to come too much. This is King Liu's palace. King Li said easily, but he knew it was very dangerous to do so, but what could he do? King Yu is now a prince, and King Yu has given him power in succession. Today, King Yu is so powerful in the Qin dynasty that no one dares to disobey his opinion. The fate of him and his mother is in King Yu's hands. The order that King Yu gave was to complete the plan, otherwise he would be questioned, and he did not have the ability to refuse in front of King Yu. Other things. There was a lingering meaning in King Yuan's eyes. King Yuan stepped into the courtyard, and immediately, his gaze returned to normal, and a charming smile appeared on his face. Prince Qin. The servant came to greet him, looking at your charming face of the Qin prince. The servant's eyes were slightly mesmerized, and his eyes seemed to be obsessed. You come out, I have something to discuss with Princess Shenyu. King Yu's eyes are light and he looks at the maid with a smile. Her eyes seemed to be of a beautiful color, and the maid's eyes were blurry, then she nodded gently, then walking outside. At this moment, she seems to obey whatever King Yuan says. King Yuan continued to walk and came to Liu Shenyu. Liu Shenyu was a little displeased to see King Yuan coming again, but he could only endure, but for some reason, after every King Yuan arrived, he couldn't give birth to his displeasure, as if his face really had a strange face. Charming, sink fish. King Yuan's voice was gentle, his eyes fixed on Liu Shenyu. What's wrong with Prince Qin? Liu Shenyu frowned slightly when he heard the title of Prince of Qin. You may be my wife. King Yuan asked. Prince Qin is not talking nonsense, I still have something, Prince Qin please. Liu Shenyu said a little displeased. King Yuan's eyes flickered, bitch, you asked for it. King Yuan's eyes suddenly changed, as if revealing a beautiful look, his body released a ray of extraordinary spiritual power, turning into an invisible light, making him look even more charming, almost falling. Liu Shenyu looked at King Yuan as if he would be drawn to the other side. It felt strange. What happened? Liu Shenyu's heart bowed. Mysterious and powerful spiritual power directly covered the sinking willowfish. At this time, the sinking willowfish only felt a little mental and was very sleepy. Langzhong manifested himself not as King Yuan, but as Ye Wuchen's face. Liu Shenyu realized that it was not good, but his spirituality was constantly weakening and eroding. Gradually, he stood in place, his expression somewhat loose, and he stood there. Bitch, since you want to choose this path, I will meet you. King Yuan's eyes were so gloomy that he didn't want to do this. After all, it was Liu Guo, but why did he have a choice? At this time, he is very upset, hates King Li, hates Liu King, and Liu Shenyu, isn't he a little cheaper than Ye Wachan? King Yuan's heart is distorted due to the growing environment. When Guoshan's will is weak, he exposes a distorted heart in illusion. At that very instant, he is like a two-sided man, the gentle and elegant prince of Qin. His talent is extraordinary, handsome and unrivaled. Similarly, he is the humble King Yuan, and can only live in the shadows and darkness. Even his abilities are invisible, the talent that is put aside. But this ability is used in women, but it has been tried and tested. Her smile became gentle and charming again, step by step to Liu Shenyu, looking at the surging beauty in front of her, she reached out, stroked her hair, and tucked her pretty face. Drowning fish, you are so beautiful. King Yuan's voice was very gentle. Although Liu Shenyu was not the three beauties of the eastern wasteland, she was also a famous beauty. The noble daughter of Liu Guo had a unique charm to her. At this moment, he stood quietly in front of her and let her choose, which further inspired King Yuan's inner touch. Don't you want to choose yourself? So, after the person who got it. Her fingers slipped from the stunning faces, caressed the beautiful neck gently, and then fell on her shoulders. With both hands outstretched, King Yuan took off Liu Shenyu's coat, and his white shoulders were unblemished. Sexy collarbone is so charming. Liu Shenyu's body trembled slightly, his eyes looked a little sore, his spirit struggled, and he seemed to feel what he was going through, and he wanted to free himself from the feeling of being controlled. But at this moment he was so helpless that he couldn't lift his spirits, as if there was a prison, locked in a mental cage and couldn't get out. He felt uncomfortable. It is beautiful. King Yuan was amazed that this body only showed the tip of the iceberg, so charming, his eyes were sometimes gentle and sometimes distorted. He put his head to Liu Shenyu's ear and neck, kissed the beauty in front of his eyes, showing a drunken expression. Save me. A low, faint voice came out of Liu Shenyu's mouth. King Yuan frowned, walked to Liu Shenyu's body, and continued to release his strong mental power. He even has the ability to resist. Behind him, footsteps came and the maid returned. Due to being in the royal palace, Liu Shenyu only had one servant to take care of his life. No guards at all, because he didn't need them. Who dares to attack the princess in the royal palace? But I didn't expect that something would happen today. King Yuan was not in a hurry. He slowly turned his head, glanced at the servant, his spirit was released, and a beautiful enchantment bloomed. He said to the waiter, stay outside. Okay. The maid was a little shy, nodded obediently, and then left. Drowned fish, no one will disturb us, you will feel happy, and you will be my future wife, but you are only advancing this beautiful process. King Yuan shouted, so strong, that it could still scream. King Yuan helped her take off the shirt again. Liu Shenyu only had thin underwear. Sexy and beautiful body let King Yuan take a deep breath. Ye Wachan, maybe don't appreciate it. In the corner of Liu Shenyu's eyes, tears slipped and Jiao's body trembled slightly. At this time, Ye Wachan was outside the palace, and a group of people landed and walked directly into the palace. They can continue to practice for a certain period of time. After all, there wasn't much opportunity for that kind of understanding. Calm down, so the descendants descend the mountain. Fortunately, no bad news was heard after descending the mountain. King Liu seemed to be waiting for their return and announced the news. Go to the drowning fish. Liu Feiyang said. Yes. Ye Wachan nodded, and experienced things in Guoshan. He seemed to understand his heart more, his feelings seemed a little stronger. The party went straight to the princess palace. At the same time, a prince figure in the kingly palace said to King Liu, Ye Fusion, they are back, are they headed for Liu Shenyu? There was a sharpness in King Li's eyes, and King Yuan had been away for some time. It really is time to come. Sending King Yuan into a horse was never the goal of his Qin dynasty, and marrying Liu Guo. The Qin dynasty was not interested. Ellipsis. In the palace where Liu Shenyu was, King Yuan was still admiring the beauty in front of him. It's too beautiful. It was more beautiful than any woman he had ever played with. I don't know how the three beauties in the eastern wasteland compare to him. His hand touched the soft skin, and he prepared to drop the final cover. Liu Shenyu's tears kept falling, Jiaosu's body trembled slightly, and he was in pain. A tearful beauty is even more pathetic. I will treat you very gently. King Yuan said, his hands were already on the thin shirt, but at this time, a voice came from outside, Princess, are you there? King Yuan's hands were stiff there. He quickly picked up the clothes on the ground and placed them on Liu Shenyu's body. Outside, the sound of footsteps sounded anxious. Immediately, a group of figures appeared. Ye Wuchen, Liu Feiyang, Ye Fuxian, the three of them came first and saw the scene in front of them. Liu Shenyu's clothes were a bit messy, as if they were randomly wearing. King Yuan's hands were right on his clothes. Liu Shenyu stood motionless with tear marks on his face. Boom! Liu Feiyang released a wild rage. Animal! Liu Feiyang's voice was hoarse, and he stepped forward, but Ye Wuchen had already become a straight sword, came to Liu Shenyu and shouted, "Sink the fish." While she was talking, she helped Liu Shenyu to dress her clothes. He seems to have been mentally assaulted, Ye Fuxian said. Ye Wuchen's brows appeared in Liu Shenyu's spirit heart. Sink fish. There was a constant voice in Liu Shenyu's mind. His body trembled, and he broke free from the shackles. She looked at Ye Wuchen with beautiful eyes, and tears continued to flow. Zhao body shivered violently, as if experiencing the most terrible thing. Seeing his expression, Ye Wuchen felt extremely guilty and painful at this moment. He hugged her body tightly and said softly, "Sink the fish, it's okay, it's all mine." Ye Wuchen's eyes stared at King Yuan behind him. His eyes seemed to be from Jiu Purgatory, and he was astonishing. Chapter 328, Kill. King Yuan saw Ye Wuchen's eyes slightly trembled, giving birth to a horror of fear. "I didn't do anything," King Yuan said, then his body flashed and he walked away from the sky, and wanted to leave the place. King Li said that there is no danger to life, but he believes that people can't do anything under anger, and where will they consider the consequences? Now he had to get out of here, and when these people calmed down, he didn't expect to be hit and lose his good deed. After that was done, Liu Guo didn't recognize him and he had to recognize him. "Do you still want to go?" Liu Feiyang stepped out towards King Yuan. King Yuan's eyes were very strange, his mental power bloomed wildly, and penetrated into Liu Feiyang's mind. At this time, Liu Feiyang finally understood himself. How bad things happened to my sister. Everyone knows that the king of Qin and Nanfei have a young son named King Yuan, who is extremely talented and highly coveted by the king of Qin. However, Qin Wang's young son has no sense of presence in the outside world, appears rarely, and fewer people know his abilities. Really, until now, Liu Feiyang knew King Yuan's abilities. "Stop him." Liu Feiyang sighed, and a palace guard appeared outside the palace, his body emptied, and King Yuan was intercepted in the void. "Put it down," Liu Feiyang said coldly. The guards who appeared as princely figures, and the force descended, and he raised his hand directly to King Yuan. "Do you dare touch me?" King Yuan gave a cold drink, but his big hand was still directly lowered and King Yuan was caught. "Take it off." King Yuan scolded angrily, "I am the son of the King. In the distance, people stepped one after another. King Liu personally arrived. Today he invited several kings and ministers to discuss the Qin dynasty, but he did not expect anything to happen here. When Wang Liu and his entourage arrived, they glanced at Liu Shenyu's clothes that Ye Wuchen was hugging, and then looked at the picture in front of them. At this moment, a terrifying force flashed across King Liu's body, which fell on King Yuan's body, and King Yuan could feel the powerful killing intent permeating King Liu's body very clearly. "Your Majesty King Liu, I didn't do anything, you can't move me." King Yuan looked at King Liu with a bit of fear. This is King Liu's palace. If King Liu really killed him at any cost, he might just have a dead end. Click. Liu Wang's fists clenched, and his intent to kill did not diminish. King Yuan hoped that he didn't dare to touch her, so he dared to do such a disgusting thing. But this is Liu's country palace. He blatantly treated his daughter and the princess of the Liu kingdom in the princess mansion. How pretentious. This is more than just deceiving people, it's just heartbreak. Your Majesty is angry. At this time, a figure walked up to King Liu and bowed, and it was King Kang. Your Honor. Another person stepped out and bowed to King Liu. Although they didn't say anything, everyone understood that they were reminding King Liu to calm down. They can all feel the anger and thoughts of killing King Liu at this time, but if the real impulse kills King Yuan, the consequences are unthinkable, and the powerful Qin dynasty will definitely come to the Liu kingdom. Breath of anger. Liu Wang's eyes turned to the speaker, his face was gloomy and unwilling to kill. At this time, Liu Shenyu also came out of Ye Wuchen's arms, and his cold eyes stared at King Yuan, with a strong killing feeling. "Kill him," Liu Feiyang said to the prince who captured King Yuan. "Your Majesty is not allowed." King Kang paused, and looked at King Liu again, shouting, "Your Majesty." Liu King clenched his fists tightly, he knew that as long as he spoke the word kill, the Qin dynasty would have a reason to kill Liu. At this time, there was the sound of the air breaking, and another force came. King Li and the Qin dynasty's power arrived. In the distance, the people of the other main forces were shocked and saw it from afar. Situation: what will happen? Big battle. Your Majesty, what does this mean, and why did you arrest my uncle? King Li frowned when he saw the scene, as if he didn't know. King Yuan was secretly relieved. When the people from King Li and Qin dynasty arrived, King Liu had to calm down. King Li, I only love the princess and want to be close, but I haven't done anything yet. You persuaded His Highness, King Yuan said. King Li blinked and looked at King Yuan. Why is my uncle so confused? After saying that, he looked at King Liu again. Your Majesty, my uncle may be fascinated by the princess. He is worried that Your Majesty will not agree to this relationship. Fortunately, he has not done anything. He also hopes that Your Majesty will forgive him. Take responsibility. Answer for this: it's a beautiful sight to marry Princess Shenyu. When they heard King Li's words, they all gave a wrong look, especially Liu Feiyang and Ye Wuchen. Their eyes were extremely cold. King Yuan did such a pitiful thing. King Li said he was lucky not to do anything. The price of doing this is, will King Yuan be beautiful to marry Liu Shenyu? There is no punishment, but all of the Qin dynasty and King Yuan. How ridiculous this is, but King Li spoke at this moment, as if it should be taken for granted. King Liu looked at King Li. In his eyes, did he exist as King Liu? Father, kill him. Liu Feiyang's eyes turned red, and his sister suffered such humiliation. King Li even said that King Yuan should marry his sister. What is the reason? Do you know what you're talking about? Wang Liu looked at King Lidao. King Li bowed slightly to King Liu and said, tell His Majesty to kill him. Everyone looked at King Li, and King Liu also looked at him, but seeing King Li looking directly at King Yuan, said, my uncle didn't do anything big wrong, kill him. My Qin dynasty army is coming. His Majesty King Liu thinks this is good. Are you threatening me? Wang Liu said. Brave, King Li said loudly, and he bowed to King Liu. I am only telling the truth. If Your Majesty promised my Qin dynasty relatives before, how could this be? But now that it is, Your Majesty Qin, you really think that this little thing ruined the relationship between the two countries and even sparked a war? For the sake of today, so as not to damage His Majesty's reputation, this is the best way for my uncle to marry the princess. King Li Kunkan spoke, and if no one was there, his cold eyes stared at him. On his body, he seemed unconscious. No one knew what he was thinking, why he dared to be so angry. Your Majesty, if the Prince of Qin marries a princess, the family will be able to do this, which is also a good thing for the princess. King Kang began to persuade. Yes, Your Majesty. Many people nodded in agreement. King Li's strength is in their eyes. They are also afraid. If they really killed King Yuan, the Qin dynasty army would be under the city. Who would dare to confirm that they could retreat? You bastard, someone rebuked, and several ministerial princes said indifferently, how can you say such impudent words? Naturally, there are people who have bones. King Liu looked at these people. When the people of the Qin dynasty arrived in King Liu's city, they visited the king and ministers. So, is there a situation now? Your Majesty, be with me for a while, but also for the princess. Someone did not say it, and said to King Liu. Well, just then, a soft voice came out. Sink fish. Everyone looked down, and then they saw a sharp reiki knife stabbed into Liu Shenyu's body and pierced the heart. His dark eyes were full of hatred and stared at the void. That figure, at this time, so many people in Liu Guo proposed that he marry King Yuan and the beast. Sink fish, why is that? I said that everything was mine. Ye Wuchen held Liu Shenyu's body in his arms. He didn't look down on the sinking fish. Liu Shenyu nodded. He looked at Ye Wuchen very gently, never gently. His hands clenched Ye Wuchen's palms tightly, as if this was the only strength he could trust. Sink fish. Wang Liu did not expect his daughter to be so fierce. He is also guilty and sorry for his daughter. The princess's temperament is too strong. Why is it necessary? King went and said, my uncle will never let the princess down. Shut up. The rest of his life roared at King Li, clenched his fists, and clicked. At this time, Ye Fusion stepped forward and walked towards King Yuan. Feiyang, you are taking care of a drowning fish. Ye Wuchen said to Liu Feiyang, who also came to him, and gave him Liu Shenyang. Ye Wuchen stepped forward, followed Ye Fusion, and said, I'm coming. Ye Fusion looked at Ye Wuchen beside him, then stopped and did not continue to step forward. What do you want to do? King Yuan watched Ye Wuchen nonchalantly approach. I saw Ye Wuchen's body, a terrible sword screamed, the sword in his hand, sharp to the extreme. Everyone's eyes were on him, and the strong man Liu Guguo scolded, arrogant. Ye Wuchen, how dare you? King Li also exclaimed angrily, but his body still stood still. Ye Wachan's body accelerated, as if turning into a sword light. Take him away. Someone Liu Geqiang shouted at the person who caught Qin Yuan. Let me go. Qin Yuan's body was also struggling, trying to break free. But at this time, Ye Wachan's body arrived, like a sword, his palm passed, and a sword flashed. Prince Liu Guo let go of Qin Yuan, but saw Qin Yuan trembled and stretched out his hand, covering his neck, blood slowly flowed out, Qin Yuan's body shook violently, and handsome and charming in my eyes, there is only endless fear at this moment. He turned around, covered his neck, and looked at King Li. Seeing King Li still standing there, King Yuan's face twisted and hesitated, looking at King Li. He wanted to speak, but the blood on his neck was like a spurt, the more he could not speak, he could only stare at King Li's figure, full of ruthlessness. Finally, his body lay gently, twitching on the ground, he did not expect that he would actually die. Chapter 329, A Storm Descends. King Yuan's body immediately lay motionless, and blood stained the ground. Countless eyes froze there, and the space in the palace was a little scary. The son of the king of Qin, King Yuan, came to the Liu kingdom to propose to his relatives. Today, he fell into King Liu's palace. No matter what the reason was, he was already dead. So what are the consequences? Many princes and ministers looked very cold and stared at Ye Wachan, and his eyes seemed to want to swallow Ye Wachan. King Liu also looked at Ye Wachan with a complex look and was extremely agitated on the inside. Can he blame Ye Wachan? He did it for his daughter, Shen Yu, his sword seemed to shatter. What about the seventh peak sword Fuyun Jianzong? The killer is the young son of the Qin king. Even if the son of the main ruler Fuyun Jian dares to do it, I am afraid that there is only one ending. But Ye Wachan did not hesitate to cut the sword, and it was decisive, even at this moment, his eyes were very firm and indifferent, the figure of one hand still stood tall. Seeing this scene, Liu Shenyu was already crying, and the pain in his heart was not as warm as the sword he was carrying. At the time when King Yuan did such crazy things, in his own house, Liu Guo's palace, those princes did not speak for themselves, did not throw away King Yuan, and even discussed how to marry King Yuan to themselves. How ridiculous is that? That's why he stabbed him with a sharp knife, and he was too desperate, he would tell these people his attitude, even if he was dead. Even his father, King Liu, hesitated, but Ye Wachan cut the sword killing, the one who insulted himself, and died. Her beautiful eyes stared at Ye Wachan's figure, revealing an incomparable sense of decisiveness. No matter what she did in this life, she would accompany him. He was born, he died, he died. People of all powers watched this scene from afar, and different thoughts entered their hearts. As for King Li, deep in his cold eyes was a cold smile. Finally, is it dead? Of course he knew why King Yuan looked at him like that before he died. King Yuan is not stupid. On the contrary, he was a very smart person. He ordered King Yuan to do so, and just now, he naturally had the opportunity to save King Yuan. Yes, but he didn't. Because this is a real plan. I didn't expect that to happen. King Yuan himself did not know the purpose of this marriage proposal, only he knew. Apply. Marry. That's not necessary. The Qin dynasty didn't care about marrying Liu Guo. This kind of bond makes no sense. Wang Yu is an old fox. At most, he only sacrificed Liu Shenyu, and did not really obey the Qin dynasty. What the Qin dynasty really needed today was a battle that vigorously shook the eastern desert. Not just a fight, but a big victory, a very urgent need. As Wang Yu thought, some students in Kotang have grown to such an extent, are they still waiting for them? They had laid a lot, and now it took a battle to ignite the whole situation. Therefore, with the scene just now, if he stopped, unless King Liu was determined to kill, who could really kill King Yuan? With Ye Wachan's strength. King Li was very excited. He died from cheap seeds and completed the plan perfectly. How could he not be excited? Of course, he wouldn't show it. At this moment, his body was filled with a cold chill. The people of Qin Wangcheng came one after another at this time and came to King Yuan's side. The indifferent breath on his body came to this space, which was extremely terrifying. Defeat him. A cold voice came out. The first person to be ordered was Prince Minister Liu Guo. They looked so cold that they looked at Ye Wachan. Even though Ye Wachan killed that person, King Yuan died in King Liu's palace, he came to propose to a relative. The sword gas whistled, and the strong person of the seventh peak of the floating cloud sword sect descended onto Ye Wachan, guarding there. Do you dare? Liu Feyang scolded angrily, he was still helping Liu Shenyu. Liu Shenyu lifted his leg, dragged his injured body, and walked step by step towards Ye Wachan. Ye Fuxian looked indifferent, and also looked at the people around him. He naturally understood what the consequences of Ye Wuchen's assassination would be on King Yuan, but he didn't stop Ye Wuchen from doing that. It was that woman. If this happened to Hua Jiu, could she not kill the other party? If Ye Wuchen didn't kill King Yuan, he would no longer be him, and his sword would no longer be sharp. The man at the seventh peak gave up. At this time, a strong one came roaring, a strong one from the first peak of Fuyun Janzong. He looked at Ye Wuchen with loose eyes, and his eyes showed an intent to kill. Ye Wuchen was a person from the floating sword sect. He killed King Yuan. He must be left. What is the seventh peak to protect him? Wouldn't that spread to the Union sect? The strongest person at the seventh peak flowed with the sword, and the terrible sword screamed, without flinching. The sword of the seventh peak Fuyun Janzong will not give way to the enemy. King Yuan had to kill. The atmosphere in the palace was suppressed to the extreme, and King Yuan's body was still lying on the ground, but no one cared about his death. At this moment, the only thing that everyone cared about was King Yuan's death. What will happen is for his own benefit. Think about it. Liu Shenyu came to Ye Wuchen, Mei Mei looked at him, the storm that suddenly made a kind of tasteless like warm water suddenly became hot. He walked over to Ye Wuchen and then leaned back quietly. Ye Wuchen is in the body. Ye Wuchen also looked at him, stretched out his right arm, and gently held it. He raised his head and looked at the people around him. He had no fear in his eyes. He wouldn't kill if he was afraid to die. Liu Feiyang looked at the two men who were surrounded by the storm, but at that time the image was so warm, his eyes shone with a terrible red light, looked at King Liu and roared, "Father King." Wang Liu trembled inside, and was also infected by the scene in front of him, and felt guilty. His daughter, who was greatly despised in the palace, but her father did not succeed for her daughter, but Ye Wuchen who shot her. What did the crown prince do? Let her daughter marry someone who insults her. Click. Wang Liu's eyes were extremely cold with his fists clenched. Uncle. At this time, King Li came to King Yuan's body and said, "You came to Liu Guo to propose. You wanted to marry Princess Liu Guo in a beautiful setting, but you didn't want to end up like this." After all, he raised his head, glanced at Liu Liu and Ye Wuchen with cold eyes, and said, "How will your majesty resolve this matter? What do you want?" Wang Liu looked at King Lidao. The three of them were taken away by me. And today's seventh peak Fuyun Janzong also wants to kill his majesty on the spot. King left the mouth, and he wanted Ye Wuchen, Liu Shenyu, Liu Feiyang take away, and let Liu Guo's people kill the people of the seventh peak of Fuyun Janzong. What if I don't agree? Wang Liu said. My uncle will not die in vain. King Li's tone was cold, but he looked very strong. Your Majesty, consider the overall situation to be of utmost importance. King Kang and the others bowed to King Liu, and many people began to persuade King Liu. Go out. King Liu looked at the people and only uttered a cold voice. The princes and ministers were stunned, saw King Liu's face, and then bowed. King Li looked at this scene with a sneer, which was naturally the expected ending. I understand His Majesty King Liu's attitude. King left his mouth and then looked at the first peak of Fuyun Janzong, said, what about Fuyun Janzong's attitude? Prince Kang's death was absolutely not the intention of my Union sect. As for Ye Wuchen, will you live or die? Jesong said coldly. Okay. King Li smiled. Okay. Fold loosely and nodded, then stepped forward, a terrifying sword air swept through the space, wrapping Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu with them, the strong people behind him stepped out. Go out. King Liu said one more word, his eyes fixed on Zongsong's body. Folded loose, he looked at King Liu and said, this is something within Union Janzong. Your Majesty also wants to intervene. This is my King Liu's palace, King Liu replied coldly. Jesong looked at King Liu, and then looked at King Li, and said, it seems that I can only come back to life first. From this point on, Ye Wuchen is no longer a disciple of the Fuyun sect. Whoever protects me will do it alone. Okay, I believe Fuyun Janzong. King Li nodded, turned around, and left with the strongest man in the first peak. King Li looked at King Liu, and then bowed, Your Majesty, go. After all, the people of the Qin dynasty took King Yuan's body and were about to leave. Wait. At this time, a voice came out, King Li stopped, his eyes slowly turned and fell on Ye Fuxian's body. What did King Yuan do that you ordered? Ye Fuxian said. King left his eyes and looked at Ye Fuxian, what are you talking about? In the first place, raising your kin was not your end goal. King Yuan died, and you don't seem sad or angry at all. Ye Fuxian practices the idea of freedom, and is very sensitive to people's emotions. King Li was not only not sad. Instead, Ye Fuxian felt joy from his body. as if he had been waiting for it. Thinking of some of the previous anomalies, he suddenly realized that the Qin dynasty never wanted to marry Liu Guo. The Qin dynasty wanted to rule the world, and Cottage Academy was the Qin dynasty's biggest opponent. They had united many armies, but Liu Guo, Liu Shenyu and Ye Wuchen were closer to him. As soon as things happened today, Liu Guo would face a great crisis, and Ye Wuchen would do the same. Qin Yuan is my uncle, my father's younger brother, and my spoiled grandfather's son-in-law. What are your thoughts? Qin Li looked at Ye Fuxian coldly and said, I want to take back my responsibilities and take me away. Uncle's unjust death led to conspiracy theories. Ridiculous. I was thinking, when you died, did you have the same expression as Qin Yuan? Ye Fuxian looked at Qin Li without arguing with him. Qin Yuan is dead, and all arguments are meaningless. As long as there was a reason, it was enough to set off a storm in the eastern wasteland. But no matter what the storm was, he knew that between him and Qin Li, people would definitely die. Chapter 330, Pessimistic. In addition to Qin Li, the Qin dynasty's strong people were liberated by oppression and fell on Ye Fuxian. Qin Li looked at Ye Fuxian with a cold smile, and then said, I was thinking the same thing. The two eyes faced each other, and there were murderous thoughts hidden in their bodies. Ye Fuxian glanced at the guards around Qin Li, his breath was terrible. He naturally knew that he couldn't kill Qin Li here. His eyes turned, Ye Fuxian looked at King Liu, and this is King Liu's palace, unless King Liu wants to leave Qin he can kill King Li. At this time, the legend of the cold voice said that the person who spoke was King Liu. What advice does your majesty have? King Li looked at King Liu. King Liu took a step forward. Immediately, a terrifying coercion fell on King Li's body. Seeing this scene, the strong people of the Qin dynasty stepped forward and went to King Li to guard him. King Li raised an eyebrow and looked at King Liu, Your Majesty will kill me. King Liu continued to step forward, holding his palm forward, and instantly, as if an invisible stream of terror was pressing down on King Li's body, like an invisible big hand, King Li's body suddenly tensed up, the whole person his face became ugly, his body twisted, as if suffering excruciating pain. Boom. The princes of the Qin dynasty released tremendous coercion, but they were all extraordinary. What happened today should be clear in your heart. The Qin dynasty also knows very well. I don't want to kill you, but I don't understand. I want you to tell Qin and stay alive. Liu Wang looked at Qin Li and said coldly, Get out. The sound fell, his palms trembled, and a loud sound sounded, and Qin Li's body was directly hit by a volley, making a muffled sound, and the corners of his mouth were filled with blood. However, he didn't care, wiped the blood on the corner of his mouth, and looked into Wang Liu's eyes with a cold smile. Of course, he did not doubt Wang Liu's IQ, but he believed that Liu Wang was a smart person, so it was impossible to kill him. Although King Yuan died in King Liu's palace, but his face is not completely torn, no one knows how the Qin dynasty will deal with Liu Guo and what actions will be taken, but Liu King really wants to kill King Li, what dynasty will do Qin? How many lives of King Liu's family? Wang Liu dared to kill them all at any cost, at any cost. His Highness King Li's words were remembered in the heart, and he said goodbye. King left the mouth, then walked away. Qian Shan, Twilight King Mengruo and everyone followed him. Chu Yi turned his head, glanced somewhere, in his heart. It's very complicated, and things today he didn't expect, he didn't know everything behind the scenes. However, the final result of the Qin dynasty's visit to Liu Guo was that King Yuan, the youngest son of King Qin, who died in King Kun's palace, died in King Liu's palace. He naturally understood the possible consequences of this incident. Ye Fuxian watched King Li leave, clenched his fists, and secretly sighed. King Liu also understood that this was a conspiracy of the Qin dynasty, but he let King Li go. King Liu considered himself for the life of the Liu nation. Ye Fuxian is not optimistic, even if King Liu does not kill King Li, Qin dynasty, is he really good? Ye Fuxian is very unsightly. Since the Qin dynasty has established this conspiracy, then everything must be prepared, and all are dead. The rest of the army knew that it was time to leave, and they arched towards King Liu, and then turned around. They naturally understand what today's events mean, and now they must return to Zhongmen as soon as possible. In response, not far from King Li and others walking out of the palace, he stopped slightly and whispered to the people around him, King Liu's palace surveillance. Yes. The digital prince headed downstairs, without leaving with King Li. King Li himself went with a group of Yukong. When he left, the corner of his mouth was still smiling coldly. In King Liu's palace, outside the princess mansion, the atmosphere was still very depressed. Many princes and ministers have a mind of their own. Wang Liu had a gloomy face, Liu Feiyang's eyes were furious, and through the idea of killing, Liu Shenyu lay on Ye Wuchen's body with wounds and cuts. At this moment, he didn't seem to want to think about anything, just wanted to rest quietly in Ye Wuchen's arms. Sink fish, Father Wang pity you. Wang Liu looked at his daughter guiltily. Liu Shenyu's daughter, Shenyu Luoyan, has the appearance of a bewitching city, she is noble and graceful, and is now facing such a thing. Wang failed to fulfill his father's responsibilities. Even in the end, he did not abandon everyone from the Qin dynasty, but died because of Qin Yuan. Liu Shenyu did not respond, he still looked very quiet, of course, he understood his father's reasons and difficulties, but such things happened to him, and he could imagine the pain he was in. King Liu raised his head, looked at the crowd, and said, by my will, Princess Liu Guo will drown the fish, and Zhu Ye will be in Ye Wuchen. Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu raised their heads and glanced at the Liu King, although this ending was what they were after before, they were not happy at this time. The surrounding princes didn't say anything, so it was the end, and there was no point in persuading King Liu. You all come down. King Liu looked at the ministers and waved. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone nodded and left, but each had his own mind, thinking about how to avoid disaster. After the people left, King Liu's eyes fell on Ye Fusion and others, and he said, I will take the medicine, and you will wait for me here. However, he blinked and turned to leave. Ye Fusion flipped over and leaped Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu. I saw Ye Wuchen holding Liu Shenyu's body with one hand, and said, I will kill King Li. His tone was very strong, as if he was only listening to this voice, he would not doubt his determination. Both Ye Wuchen and Ye Fusion wanted King dead. It didn't take long for King Liu to return and he came to Liu Shenyu with a bottle of emerald green medicine in his hand. Instead of feeding Liu Shenyu directly, he gave it to Ye Wuchen, saying, Ye come on. Ye Wuchen nodded, holding the Cinque willow sitting on the ground, then the arm put the elixir into the Cinque willow, a thick stream of life flowed in the willow Cinque, and the wound was immediately filled with emerald green light of life, recovering the wound little by little, is definitely a healing medicine that precious to Liu Guo. Then, King Liu took out a delicate box, handed it to Ye Wuchen, and opened it, which contained an extremely thin sword, as thin as a cicada's wings, refracting an extremely cold sword light. There is an ancient yellowed book. This is the sword and sword recipe that I collected from Liu Guo. This is a dowry for Shen Yu, and you accept it, Wang Liu told Ye Wuchen. Your Highness, Ye Wuchen nodded. King Liu looked at Ye Fusion again, and put another ancient box in his hand on the ground and opened it. There was a cloak in the ancient box, as if transparent, with a silver glint. On this robe, you can feel the aura of a terrifying fluctuation. Obviously this is a magic cloak. You are a student of the lodge, and you must teach someone who naturally owns the cottage. I have nothing to give you. This Mage's cloak has the ability to disguise, maybe you can use it in the future. Liu Wang handed it to Ye Fushindao. I asked you to take care of Feiyang and Shenyu before, but now that things have come to this stage, I can only ask you to take them to the academy. Although their talent is not enough to enter the lodge, they should be admitted to the academy. Enough. Ye Fusion looked at King Liu. As a hegemon, King Liu pleaded with him at this time and naturally expected a possible crisis, but even so, he let go of King Li. Since His Majesty is so pessimistic about Liu Guo, why not take people from the Qin dynasty? Ye Fusion said. What's the point of killing them? Will the Qin dynasty be destroyed? Wang Liu said, on the contrary, killing them, the Qin dynasty has really become famous and can kill immorally. Now even if he uses King Yuan's death as an excuse, how can the people of the world be idiots? If the Qin dynasty does not do nothing, the other forces in the eastern wasteland and the people of the world will naturally see it. Ye Fusion said nothing, and King Liu said, I have ordered the dismissal of King Liu Palace, hoping that the Qin dynasty will not kill them all. Besides, I will personally escort you to the academy. It's not too late, let's go. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded, and the Qin dynasty would not dare to touch him now, but Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu were different. They had to leave King Liu's palace immediately, return to the hut, and see the brother. Can sister come forward? No dust, let's go. Ye Fusion turned around, Ye Wuchen helped Liu Shenyu's body to stand up. King Liu personally escorted them and brought them to the ancient kingdom entrance of the Liu kingdom. Then King Liu, Ye Wuchen and many strong people entered the ancient kingdom. Ye Fusion and the rest of his life could only enter because the realm had not yet reached the heaven realm. In the ancient world, they agreed to meet at the exit of the academy. The news of King Liu's palace spread very quickly in King Liu's city, the hearts of many people trembled, and they felt that a terrible storm was about to sweep through the country. All these people came to discuss King Kang's younger son King Yuan's proposal to Liu Guo. They were discussing whether King Yuan and Liu Shenyu were a good couple, but suddenly news emerged that Liu Shenyu almost died alone. Prince King Yuan, he was killed in King Liu's palace, but King Liu ordered that Zhu Liu be matched with Ye Wuchen. It was so shocking that even ordinary people would see that there would be an earthquake in the eastern wasteland. What will the Qing dynasty do? Many people in the palace left one after another, and the king of Liu even ordered the people of the palace to be fired. This made the people of Liu Guo understand that King Liu thought that he could not compete with the Qing dynasty at all, and was very pessimistic. The people of all major forces also rushed back. They all thought that the Qing dynasty only wanted to marry Liu, and gradually let Liu follow the Qing dynasty's steps, but obviously they were all wrong. It seems that the steps taken by the Qing dynasty tend to be more radical. Moreover, they felt the strong faith of the Qing dynasty. So what will happen in the next battle? Will Liu Guo, one of the top forces in the eastern wasteland, be transferred from the eastern wasteland?